Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast. I'm Jessie Lezak, fractional CMO at BDEX, along with BDEX's CTO, David Wellborn. Thanks for being here, DW.
My pleasure, as always.
Yeah, how's it going?
No, pretty good. It's
Good.
never a dull moment in this ever-changing landscape.
That is true, and we're going to be getting into that just a little bit here in a moment. But first, let's introduce our guest. Today on Deconstructing Data, we're thrilled to welcome Jeremy Levitan, CEO of NewText. Welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Hi, how are you?
Not too bad. How are you?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Well, we would love to learn more about you. And could you please share a little bit about your background with us?
Absolutely. It's a long background, so I'll try to keep it a little bit brief based on how long we have, and we just have 45 minutes for the actual topic at hand. So I spent 12 and a half years in academia, PhD in mechanical engineering, 2 postdocs in applied math, and then realized that I didn't want to live in academia forever. So left that and ran an incubator for a venture capital fund focused on lead gen. They're down in Cambridge, had some phenomenal experience with data aggregation, data pens. Sort of the coolest story out of that is we had 27 terabytes of clickstream data that we purchased from internet service providers in mind to figure out what the corpus of keywords were that were driving the best performing traffic to some of the competitors to the companies that we were incubating. After 4.5 years there, I left and became CTO division of the Washington Post. They're focused on education lead gen. After that, I created a digital marketing agency. We ran Facebook ads for some of the largest direct-to-consumer challenger brands. If you can think of a large D2C unicorn, we probably ran spend for them on Facebook. We had a phenomenal tech stack there. We had automatic bidders. We had bidding algorithms. We had a pixel service built on AWS with phenomenal scalability there. Exited that business in 2016 to Twitter. And I spent 4 years there in a variety of roles. The first role was running global advertising performance for Twitter, which was a post-sales support team in the sales organization. I worked on product initiatives in the revenue products organization, including commerce, shopping, pixels and tracking and measurement, and a variety of other things there. Left that in 2020 and spent 2 years at VaynerX, running special products for Gary Vaynerchuk, where I was exposed to SMS and some work that he was doing for one of his personal businesses, Wine Library. He built a phenomenal business called NewText, which allowed consumers to basically discover and purchase wine via SMS, and started this business, NewText, about 18 months ago, venture-backed, to try to bring a new consumer surface for interaction and SMS to the world. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for being here. And we've got some really great topics to cover. It's going to be a great conversation because you're in SMS, and both myself and DW have a history in SMS. So
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to it. I'll pull up the first topic, if you don't mind kicking us off on navigating the shift.
Yes.
Identity graphs and marketing attribution in a cookieless era.
Yeah, so I've sort of been in this space for a while. Back in 2007, so we were buying clickstream data. So sort of the analog that I'll give there is exposed URLs with referrers and terminal URLs. So we could go in and mine things like Google search Q equals insurance deals in Cambridge, Massachusetts, September 2007, and find the URL that they went to. Google got wise to this and started obfuscating the searches and creating G-click IDs in about 2008 and 2009. And that was sort of the first demarcation of a platform making it harder and harder to do attribution. Up until that point, you could see exposed keywords. You could see whether it was a paid search or whether it was an organic search. And sort of fast forward to other evolutions in the marketing space. We see iOS 14.5 coming out and making it harder and harder to pass things like IDFA, allowing people to roll IDFAs, device identifiers, device UUIDs on the Google Android system being able to be rolled coming in the next year or so. Cookies being deprecated, starting with third-party cookies, going from no end date to 30 days to same day,
Mm.
iOS transmitting and some of the upcoming changes in iOS where they may be removing the ability to do things like adulterating links and putting query parameters. All of this is making it harder and harder to do the goal of a marketer, advertiser, agency, which is find truth in advertising. Where is my spend most efficient? What traffic sources, campaigns, creative audiences drove the best performance? And when I started in the space in 2007, we sort of saw this this world where it was 1 to 5 clicks or interactions with an ad before there was a conversion. I mean, somebody may see an ad on Google for funding opportunities to go back to for-profit education schools. Enhance your education and click here. And we saw reasonable conversion rates on that first click, which made it very easy to do things like attribution. The world changed over the last 18 years, where more and more we're seeing a rise from 1 to 5 clicks or interactions with an ad per conversion to getting up to 10 plus interactions. And some of those are view-based interactions. Somebody sees an ad, they don't actually click on the ad. How do you track that in a world? How do you do proper measurement and attribution to somebody clicks on an ad on their mobile device, and maybe they go home on their desktop device because they're at work and they don't want to sit there and enter credit card information at their work terminal. So trying to do things like cross-device, trying to do things like multiple sessions and stitching them together, trying to identify when new consumers interact with an ad. When does a brand see a net new consumer for the first time versus when do they see a return consumer, a past purchaser, those types of behaviors. The world is, there's tremendous headwinds right now, making it harder and harder for advertisers, agencies, marketers to basically find right. And in a cookieless world, in a world where all you have is the ability to stitch together things like session variables. A click comes in, I can see where it comes in through a Google Click ID, a Facebook Click ID, Twitter Click ID, some of these other things. That's deterministic. That maps back to an ad impression and a click. But what do you do in the world where there's not a click, where there's just an interaction? iOS has made it harder and harder. They have campaigns, they have measurement, they've reduced the number of channels that you can measure. So where I look at the space now is this last immutable identifier that exists isn't things like email. It may not even be address, because credit card numbers change, and you can have things where there's dummy credit cards that get entered for things like Apple Pay and other payment providers where there may not be an actual need for an address that's sent to somebody. But this last immutable identifier that exists is really phone number. So like email is another thing. In iOS 16 and beyond, you can do things like hide my email, where the net default on a checkout now is, do I want to actually show my email address, or do I want iOS to generate a dummy email address? If it's not even my dummy email address, it's my personal email address, I can now do things like put in periods that may cause problems for some attribution models. I can put things like pluses. Is a rules-based mechanism that every single attribution company now has to sit there and say, what are the rules that Gmail uses? Does Jeremy plus junk mail resolve to the same email as Jeremy? Phone number doesn't change. I can't make up my phone number. My cell phone number goes to me. Even more phenomenally is this world that we're living in right now, that two-factor authentication, Google tries to steer you towards that. If you leverage Gmail or you leverage Google Photos, two-factor authentication, SMS shortcodes come to my phone. So these companies are already relying on the fact that this phone is a one-to-one map between the brand and a consumer. And that's a great North Star to start from for modeling or building a device graph or building an identity graph. I like to say over and over again, this is this last immutable identifier. Phone number's not changing. My phone number's not changing. My device, my IP address may be me. It may be my wife. It may be my kids. Email address may change due to iOS and privacy, but that phone number is going to stick around as a great source of truth for measurement and attribution.
You don't think we'll start obfuscating phone numbers? Is that the word? Did I say it right?
Obfuscate. I think it's going to be very hard. There are opportunities to do things like burner phone numbers, and you can do Google Voice. Google Voice, I'll say, like, that's sort of the bellwether here. About 5 years ago, it made it very difficult to set up a second phone number per Google login. It's not impossible, but I think like the set of phone numbers that's possible is very hard to resolve. To say that there's a limit, it's whatever, 10 characters, 9 digits each. It's hard to imagine a world where that becomes something different than the 36 alphanumeric characters for each single letter of an email. It's not impossible. I'm not telling you it's never going to happen, but I don't see on any roadmap for iOS that that's going to happen anytime soon. I think we're going to see a lot of things come first that are going to make attribution harder and harder.
Eesh. What's your take on this, DW?
No, I was just going to ask, from a technology point of view, like, SMS is one thing, but what about iMessage? Does that give Apple an opportunity to throw a wrench in the works?
So yes, and so obviously Apple is really, really good at throwing wrenches. A lot of this stuff came out. Obviously, the start of a lot of the troubles for attribution was iOS 14.5. Before that, it was TCPA, GDPR, CCPA, a lot of these litigated privacy standards that existed from different governments. But iOS 14.5 was sort of the first one to come in and say, we're going to make cookies be something different than it historically was. iMessage is this weird standard. Apple's already telegraphed that next year they're going to open up the standard. I think there was an antitrust case. I'm not an attorney, so I'm speaking on something a little bit beyond what I'm comfortable in. But my understanding is they're going to be opening up the iMessage standard, which is going to make it easier. iMessage sort of resolves to two different things. It resolves to an email address or it resolves to a phone number. And both of those, if you send a message, SMS to one of those phone numbers, it'll show up as an iMessage for a consumer and be blue. And sort of this inter OS operability is going to come in next year. So as long as you have that phone number, there still is the ability to stitch it together and get delivery on somebody's device. If they reply back to something that's not iMessage enabled, it'll still show up as a traditional text message.
It's going to get complicated.
Yeah. Well, but have you? How does the introduction of RCS impact your future plans?
I don't have a lot to speak on that right now, unfortunately.
Oh, okay, right.
What about WhatsApp?
So what's interesting about WhatsApp is they've taken sort of this identity and obfuscation layer a little bit more seriously than like SMS, which is a phone number mapping. Most of the SMS delivery providers that are out there, like the large publicly traded companies that deliver bulk messages to people at scale, already have support for WhatsApp. And it's the same campaign level. I think that's something, because it sits behind like Meta's ecosystem, there's an opportunity there for Meta to sort of create a privacy layer on top of it. But right now you can get inboxing to WhatsApp relatively easily. WhatsApp is a lot cheaper to get inboxing than some countries. Sort of the dirty secret in texting and SMS is that outside of the US, there are countries where costs to deliver become prohibitively expensive.
Right.
Well, and in the US, not as many people are on WhatsApp. Isn't that still the case?
Correct. The penetration really is ex-US.
Yeah.
Right.
It was a lot of emerging market. It was a lot of land grab for Facebook to come in and say, where do we not have the largest footprint? And where can we acquire 1 billion users that we don't necessarily have the depth in our traditional apps? Definitely.
I was reading on LinkedIn about how you're buying artwork and creating NFTs. Did I read that right?
Yeah. So one of the privileges that I had from working with Gary Vaynerchuk was sort of seeing the rise of the NFT space. And one of the things we did, we built 2 captive businesses in order to test out the technology. I'm a big fan of sort of eating your own dog food and never trying to go to market with a technology platform that you can't prove out that it works at scale. So we built out a consumer brand in Dewdrops. Ran that for about 4 months, enabled us to test SMS at scale and transactions via SMS. It was relatively successful, with the caveat that the NFT space right now is not doing as strongly as it did 2 years ago. But we were able to bring the ease of collecting to a large new set of consumers. The brand charter there was, how would I get somebody like my parents, 77 years old down in South Florida, who are never going to do crypto at scale, or never going to write down 12 secret words and have a wallet on MetaMask. How do we make it much easier for somebody to come in and collect digital collectibles? And what was great about that as a testing environment for NewText was this idea that fulfillment is zero. So what I didn't want to do was build like a collectible sneaker business where I would have to have a warehouse space and actually ship something to somebody. We built out high quality digital collectibles, brought in the best artists in the space. We did 17 different drops, brought in some of the top artists. These are people like right now, there's a Sotheby's auction going on with Art Basel. We have one of those artists did our first inaugural drop, Brian Brinkman. We did democratize access, meaning that we opened it up. We had a time limited release. Anybody that wanted to collect that digital collectible, as long as they replied back within the set period of time, like 12 o'clock in the afternoon to 11:59, they would be entered into a raffle. And basically it's democratic access. Everybody has equal access. It's not front running conditions. It's not a lot of these things that we saw in the NFT space in the 2019 through 21 run up, where you had to stay up at 3 a.m. to see if something dropped on Twitter. So we built that as a captive business. We're able to do a lot of the technology development against that. Live audiences, compliance, consent to check, building best practices around how does a brand build a consumer workflow, a new user sign up to make sure that they're properly collecting consent. It's talking to compliance teams at some of the largest law firms and figuring out where may we run into issues with SMS and texting at scale in light of new regulations that may exist. So it was a great proving ground. NFTs are a crazy market. I'm not upset that we're not still running that side of the business, but that was run as a testing ground. Again, like let's prove out the technology in a live environment before we go to market and try to work with other brands and have them put their capital up front. Let's use some of our capital that we were able to raise.
So it was a test run.
Exactly. It was a test run. We saw a couple things come in, which is like very interesting. There's obviously issues with compliance and scalability and when do you send messages and threads on certain SMS channels. If you send a message to somebody on sign up saying, maybe we want to do double opt-in, right? You have a checkbox, you put in your phone number, you get a message that says, DW, can you just confirm you want to receive messages from Jeremy and NewText? If you don't reply yes to that, but it's a brand that only requires single opt-in, and we send another message the next day, which thread is somebody replying back to? How do we reconcile that and do collision detection? Those sorts of things are really cool. We hadn't thought of that outside of a lab environment. And now we had live drops and live sales and live transactions. So we could sit there and go, okay, what went wrong here? And the world of SMS is also this crazy space where every ex-US, every single country and every single cell provider operates differently. So you talk about like email and inbox rates. Like if I'm trying to figure out why Bell Canada is not getting delivery, that's a very, like, it's sitting there one by one and just triaging and then working with SMS providers going, why is this not getting through? Is it getting stopped because of stop words, because of rate limits, because this number was previously used by somebody spamming and selling something?
A URL, they're using a bit.ly link.
Exactly. Is the link shortener the wrong link shortener?
Right.
All of those. So it really was like, it was a phenomenal opportunity for my development team and my CTO to get in there and look at live data before we're live with a paying customer. So if you guys are out there, you're doing startups, like love captive brands. I've done it almost my entire life. I ran the incubator for the venture capital fund. We built things ourselves to test out our tools. When we had our agency, we ran our own campaigns to make sure that things worked. In NewText, we ran our own campaigns to make sure that the technology and plumbing all worked.
Yeah, what do they call it? Make sure that you eat your own cooking or something like that.
You eat your own dog. Yeah, right. You eat your own food.
Eat your own dog food, I guess. Yeah,
whatever it is. Depends on how good and how high quality and gourmet your output is. But
absolutely, no, that's all great. We could probably continue on this topic for a while, but I'm going to switch gears here for our second topic, and then we kind of covered it a little bit. Really, the rising.
Yeah, we already bumped into it.
Right, yeah, we really covered this,
but I think like this is the crux of like what I would say today versus what I would say 10 years ago as a younger marketer. I'm not going to say that I'm old, but when I spent my time at Twitter, I was never standing up saying we need to have phone number be the nexus that ties everything together. Now it's yes, we should, and I would say nearly 100% of marketers are treating cell phone number and cell phone number collection as an extension of email. And it's not. It shouldn't be. It's done right now because it's a natural extension from some of the largest email service providers that's out there. If you sign up for whatever, you want to do bulk email campaigns or transactional email campaigns with a large publicly traded company, they're going to say, do you want to enable workflows in SMS? And you click yes. And it looks like the workflows for email. But if somebody replies back to an email and says yes, that's not the same thing as somebody replying back to an offer to buy 12 bottles of super premium wine at a phenomenal deal where you know that it's that consumer, and you can reasonably assume that there's a true connection, one-to-one mapping between that consumer and their intent signal to buy.
That's a good point. And you know what you just made me think of is like what email could learn from text messaging? Because man, I wish I could reply to an email and say stop.
Yeah, so emails is, so I've lived in the world of email for a while too. And we had bulk email delivery as part of our portfolio for technology suites that we built at the incubator. I've had bulk email companies along the way, have done lead gen at scale. The division of the Washington Post that I worked for and was CTO there, we did bulk email and we work with affiliates as well. And email's gotten harder and harder. And email measurement has gotten harder and harder. Starting with Google rendering all images pre-rendering so that open rates don't become a real proxy for is there deliverability or not. Most companies and most marketers still don't do A/B testing properly on email, segmentation, holdout lists, looking at cause and effect for if I send an email, what's the right cadence. Emails is this like black magic right now that it's more hand wavy than science. And I think what's interesting about SMS, sort of like the metrics on costs for delivery, bulk email delivery is 25 cents to 50 cents per thousand delivered. SMS is $8 to $15 on average across the entire world. So when you think about that cost scale, that disparity between the ability to get email in at volume, it takes much more for me to deliver an email and actually care about the cost than it does to deliver SMS and actually care about the cost. So that's put a razor focus on, are we efficient with SMS campaigns? That I think the right sort of pendulum swing would be to go back to email campaigns and say, at what point does the cost have to be expensive? And at what point is expensive enough to say we need to justify the same rigor, analysis, analytics, forethought, and experimentation going into delivery of an email campaign? Email driving an action, the main call to action for email is a click back to a website. That's a very loose, thin consumer intent. On SMS, I can drive somebody to an actual transaction, like wine text, like Gary does with Wine Library, like we do with Dewdrops or some of the brands that we work with, where reply back yes to get something actually shipped to your house. Nobody's doing that by email. They maybe could. There's still that disconnect between email identity and actual intent signal. But
man, there's a lot to unpack there. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, well, first of all, you're working with Gary Vee, so I got to stop and say, like, how cool is that?
It's great.
I bet.
It's great. I've known him for many, many years. Phenomenal energy, like the amount of thought that he puts into decision making. There's like gut. Like he talks a lot about how there's gut, but then buried behind it, and he often like dismisses this, but he's very, very thoughtful. And gut really is pattern recognition. It's the emergence over 30 years of doing marketing at scale, the ability to see something and identify that this is more likely the case than not. He's dismissive of like that, but he has this phenomenal pedigree of being right a lot. He has a phenomenal team. He hires really, really smart people that are all energized, focused on outcomes that matter for advertisers. Like I used to preach when I had my agency, that brands are not interested in spend, right? Brands are not interested in like, what is my budget that I spent around that? Brands are interested in business outcomes. And Gary is like singularly focused on how do you deliver business outcomes for the brands that he works with, or the connections that he works with, or what means success for you, which is very interesting to see. So it was a phenomenal opportunity to work with him. He was an investor in this new company. So still talk to him regularly, but phenomenal energy, great person. Loved my time there. Would recommend it for anybody out there looking for an opportunity to be in like a high energy environment with a lot of craziness, but good craziness directed towards the right things.
Yeah, and if you want to learn how to do LinkedIn, just go follow Gary V. Vaynerchuk.
Right. So, and I'll say, like, we talked about a lot about experimentation and how like SMS is this fertile ground for experimentation, and email, most people overlook the levels of experimentation there. Like everything that Gary's doing on all of the socials is deliberate, meaning it's either a proven strategy that his team has done or he's testing something new. If you listen to a lot of Gary's recent recordings, a lot of the videos that he puts out now, he's talking about underpriced attention and arbitraging underpriced attention. I think he announced a new book coming out next year. Like, that's a great mantra. And when you look at things like LinkedIn is a phenomenal opportunity where most brands, and that includes like corporate brands, but also individual brands, are not leveraging in the right way. There's phenomenal energy there for learning something, building brand. Like brands really are, this is something Gary says that I'll steal. It's like brands are built in social, where like LinkedIn is a phenomenal opportunity. It's underpriced attention right now, whether that's organic or even on the paid side. Phenomenal delivery, strong reach, outcomes look good. If you're a B2B brand trying to sell and you don't have a strong LinkedIn presence, like you're missing out.
You're totally missing out. Thank you, Jeremy. I completely agree with you there. And to make sure that we get to our third topic, because I can talk about, full disclosure, I can talk about LinkedIn all day. I think you could probably.
I can derail and talk about any, like you can throw a random subject on the screen. I can probably talk about it.
Same, yeah. Well, we're on SMS marketing, which I'm glad we're talking about this, because one thing that really stands out about SMS marketing too is like people actually open it and read it. Let's talk.
So SMS. Depending on who you talk to, they'll tell you that it has 97% open rate. And what does that mean? But it's not the same thing that open rate means in email. Open rate in email means your one-by-one tracking image, your pixel renders. In SMS, most phones, it's a pop-up. And actual open rate means it's read. If you do like brand recall, aided recall, unaided recall, any of the traditional measures that anybody would do for effectiveness of advertising, and you run anything against SMS, the recall that somebody received that SMS is going to outperform any other channel. I'll give you 9-to-1 odds on that for any channel that's out there. SMS, as we talked about before, it's often overlooked. It's like the last thing that people do. So I would say, like, if you're a marketer that's looking at it today and you're saying, what is the one thing I can do to make sure that I'm leveraging SMS effectively, it would be go back to your web designers and make sure that there's a reason why on first interaction with the consumer, you're collecting a phone number and you're collecting consent to contact. Build that list. Once you have that list, then you can come back and figure out what's the right way to do consumer touch points. What's the cadence? What's the message? How strong of a transaction message should it be versus a brand building message? But step one is collect that list and get consent. We talk to some of the largest D2C brands and we go through a lot of calls and they're like, okay, NewText sounds amazing. Let's sign up. And then we get on calls with their tech team and it's how many phone numbers do you have consent to contact? And the number comes in absurdly low, fractions of what they're selling on transactions on a monthly basis. And we're like, this mismatch has to be solved. So that's number one. Other things is just recognize that SMS, the fidelity of getting a consumer to read it, that disparity in open rates, 97% versus probably 10% or 5%. And like I typically model out 5%. For some very strong brands, it might be 10%. But 5% open rate versus 97% open rate means that SMS serves two purposes. One is it creates brand recall. It brings a brand back to top of mind for any of the consumers that you're interacting with. But it also creates this really interesting point of interactivity with a consumer, where if you think more broadly, like what we're doing at NewText, is this new ability to take that SMS and turn it into an actual transaction. So can you compress the funnel? Is the right call to action really bring somebody back to a website, or is the right call to action really reply back yes to get 12 bottles of wine, or reply back yes to get a refill for your air conditioning filters, or reply back yes to get another bottle of shampoo, or reply back yes to increase your storage from 1 terabyte to 2 terabytes, or reply back yes to increase your budget on an advertising campaign from $50 a day to $75 a day because you exhausted it at 3 p.m. There is no reason why brands should require a consumer to click on an email, remember what their login and password is, reset their password, get an SMS to authenticate that it's them logging in, navigate through the website to figure out how they do all of these things, and ultimately complete this transaction, versus simple SMS that drives to the outcome that brands actually care about and that delivers actual outcomes and top line revenue growth.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there, DW. What are you
No,
think?
I'm speechless actually, because everything he says is true.
Yeah.
Everything is a bottom line, absolutely true. And if you would have asked me 10 years ago that the future of marketing would be SMS, I would have said absolutely not. Or even more, maybe 12 or 13 years ago, I would have said that the future is in, I don't know, some apps or whatever, you know. But this is a different time, and SMS has shown itself to be remarkably resilient and ubiquitous. There are places in little villages, and that don't even have running water or electricity in the middle of Africa that people do have access to flip phones that do text.
Yes.
And they actually
It is data light.
They actually buy and sell products from one village to the next over text messages. And like I said, it's ubiquitous and resilient.
Yeah.
So
what I think back to,
I'm absorbing all this.
I spent the 4 years of Twitter, and it's amusing because it's sort of like Twitter started out with 140 characters per tweet.
Yeah.
And the question was why, and it's because it matched the length of a text message.
Oh.
Yep.
And there's a lot there that makes sense, which is like, how do you provide ubiquitous conversation with an audience? And that was Twitter's mission originally. And now I'm sitting here, like, having spent 4 years of Twitter, 2 years with Gary, and we're building this thing that like still lives in 140 characters. It's interesting full circle. I'll say, DW, like the things that sort of look like extensions to text that didn't exist years ago. So like app notifications is the thing. Like the opt-in rate for app notifications is still absurdly low. Unfortunately,
Yep.
I think most app publishers would love for somebody to turn on notifications. Apple's made it harder and harder. They've sort of buried where notifications are if you turn it off the first time. Where is it?
Yep.
Rediscovering it's harder and harder. That's like the gold standard. If you're an app and you can get somebody to turn on notifications, cost of delivery is zero. There's a large ecosystem of large-scale companies that have built out push notifications as workflows to drive transactions. That's very interesting. That still sits in the app ecosystem. Like the dirty secret we haven't talked about is that if I am an app publisher and I drive a transaction in an app, I pay Apple or I pay Google a percentage of my transaction. If I'm an app publisher, like imagine a large game. You're a whale in the game. You buy $10 packs once a month to do whatever it is. Whatever you might be doing in the game.
No judgment.
No judgment. I play a lot of games, much to the dismay of my kids. I tell them they can't play the games or put money in the games, but I do. But if you're a gamer and you provided that app publisher your phone number and they send you an SMS message and they have payment information for you and you say, yes, I want to get this special booster pack for $9.99, 100% of that revenue goes to the app publisher. If they send a push notification and somebody back to the app where they do that transaction, 65 to 70% of the money goes to the app publisher. So that's this interesting ecosystem that like is often overlooked. That we're really bullish about that as an opportunity space for SMS, this sort of side load transactions. The other thing that's emerging and it's going to come out, it's been in iOS beta, I think 2 cycles now, is this concept of web push notification. So the extension of notifications and app where now if you're a page, if you're a large e-commerce company, you may have an app, but more than likely somebody may not have downloaded your app. You can set up a web push notification where they can actually send you, as long as you save the web page to the home page, to your home screen of your phone, you now can set up notifications and do the same mechanism. Those are 2 emerging spaces that I like and I'm bullish about, but with the caveat that notifications back to app transactions have this like cannibalistic Apple taking a piece or Google taking a piece. That is a large opportunity space where as long as the cost of driving a transaction is less than 30%, these large app publishers are net positive. And that's been a phenomenal opportunity space for us. We've had some great conversations with some of the largest app publishers, payments providers for app publishers, where they're looking at this going, okay, I get it now. I can do this new consumer surface. I may have to invest in collecting consent and collecting phone numbers and building a CDP. Maybe I didn't do direct marketing before because in app notification, as long as I have a device ID, it goes into whatever ecosystem partner I've licensed in to do notifications and workflows. I don't have to deal with that, but now maybe I have to collect the phone number in a privacy compliant way with a checkbox. And the cost of doing that, as long as it's less than 30% of the total transactions, net, that publisher is going to be better off than they would be from running a notification scheme or only have in-app purchases.
So, I guess this, what you're saying is this is going to, using SMS, like you want to top off your account. Like I would love it if Starbucks sent me an SMS, quite frankly,
Yes.
and say, should I go ahead and, add $20 or whatever into your account? Yes, please. That would be great. As it is right now, okay, yeah, let's do this. Oh, you got to log in. What's my login? I've
Right.
become very gnarly, with the weird passwords and stuff. Do I remember? Absolutely not. So I have to look up my password thing. And not only that, I got to remember the password for my password thing.
Correct.
I get frustrated by the end of all that. And I'm like,
I have
what?
no idea what my Starbucks password is, but I do know that
Right?
both of my kids are 14 and 17. My oldest son is in high school, loves to go to Starbucks. I got a note from him this week saying, you're out of money in Starbucks. And then he's in the Starbucks app that he's logged into because it's my login, because it's my payment information, trying to run payment to add money to the card, having no idea how it actually works. It's expired credit cards. He's sitting there at the store, at the terminal, trying to reach me via SMS, where all Starbucks would have to do would be to send a message saying exactly what DW said. Do you want to add $25 using your last stored payment method? Yes.
You guys get
so you're actually talking about the frictionless transactions. Right.
Yeah.
Correct. So like Starbucks is one. That's a very clear example. But there's think about accounts receivable.
Oh, that's a good one.
Where imagine you're the payments, you're the AR team at a company, and people have paid you by credit card and they have it stored. And all you have to do is send a text message saying, Jesse, you're 60 days due. Do you want to charge it to this credit card? Yes. Or you're my house. We have the AC guy out to repair it. Do you want to charge the credit card that you have on file? Yes.
That's very interesting. We had a program for, I think I can say it, for Walgreens pharmacy refills. It was a lot like that, and it was very lucrative. And yes. I could say this would go over big. Sorry, I'm over here making notes, so that's why I keep looking away.
That's okay.
I guess
a lot of information.
I told you guys we'd be able to talk on these topics this whole time because now we only have 4 minutes left, and this always goes by way faster than expected. So, Jeremy, before we go, we'd really like to know, this is something we like to ask all guests.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite tools in your tech stack?
So our tech stack, I'm going to say we are a big fan of brute force. So my CTO, he's been my CTO, Martin. He's been my CTO for my last 6 startups. We've had a couple exits, so we've been very lucky. We've worked together since I joined that incubator back in 2007. We are still Java, MySQL. We build things super simple. We're big fans of transparency. Meaning that any developer or anybody within the company should be able to interrogate what we're doing. With that said, some of the things that I've loved to play with recently, I'm a huge fan of ChatGPT. And I say this in the weirdest way. It's going to be the strangest answer you've heard on this. But I've had employees that you could tell 100% of the work output is generated by ChatGPT. That's not a good situation. But where I like ChatGPT is checking my work. Mm-hmm. So when I'm writing position papers or I'm doing presentations and I'm articulating something, having it go back and look at it and ask if it's the right way to articulate something. If there's anything that could be augmented, that as a workflow has been phenomenal. Again, not a fan of replace work, but a big fan of checking work and augmenting. I'm still a huge fan of all of the visual query browsers that are out there. Those have gotten much, much better in the last decade. Much easier to connect to MySQL databases and make sense of things. ChatGPT is very good at explaining SQL queries. I haven't found great success in having it write SQL queries for me. I'm pretty proficient on the SQL side, but having explained it and having it identify when there's opportunities for scalability issues or where we can add additional indices. So ChatGPT, and then very different from when I did my first startup in 2000 and actually 1999. I raised money in between undergraduate and graduate school for my first startup. But since 2007, I would say since 2012, we're 100% on Google Suite, which seems interesting. But if you asked me in 2007, would I ever get rid of Excel? The answer would have been no. And now I live in Google Sheets and can produce something as proficient there. So big fans of these cloud-based systems. I'll say 2007, 27 terabytes of clickstream data stored on-site, on-prem, RAID 10 arrays in a back room. 100% of our servers are now in the cloud. The ability to spin up, if I have a friend that calls me and says, I want to do a new startup, can you advise? It's under $5,000 of cost for them to spin something up and go live, where it would have been $50,000 to $100,000 a decade ago.
Not just that, a long-term commitment too.
Oh yeah, exactly. Sign a 2-year deal
either
for a rack.
Yeah, right. Or a 3-year lease agreement, or
Yes.
buying them outright. And not only that, there's a hidden cost of having sysadmins keep that stuff alive.
Correct.
Where you don't have to do so much. I have to ask you. You said Google Suite. Does this mean that you're in a Google Cloud as well?
No, we're in AWS.
AWS. Oh, that's so
Yeah.
funny. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
And
are we.
that's just familiarity. Honestly, like we've had very good conversations. Google's been amazing to work with, and they've tried to have us migrate over to Google Cloud.
Same here.
We're very proficient at AWS with Route 40, with all of the tools there. We've just done it over and over again. We don't have to relearn something.
Right.
We're not at the point where we have, we're not storing petabytes in the cloud. We're not doing like, the costs are not prohibitive where I have to look at what is the cost savings and saving 10% per month. So we're big fans. I'm not saying Google Cloud's a great product suite. We've built things on it before, but today we're 100% AWS. And then Google Suite for all of the workflow tools that we're leveraging.
All the business tools.
Business tools, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we're in the same boat with AWS. It's just a familiarity. We've been using it since it came out, basically.
Exactly. And they continue to
expand our
innovate, and they
on-prem
release
stuff.
new server storage and micro instances, and it works.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm basically lazy, and I hate having to do too much work. So anything that comes out serverless,
I'd
chances
rather
are I can
innovate
use it.
somewhere else than innovate
Mhm.
and rewrite a tech stack to support whatever the cloud-based computing platform.
Exactly.
yeah.
It's great for startups.
This conversation has been so good. I know we're over time, but Jeremy, if you don't mind, could you answer one last question that we ask all of our guests?
Yeah. Well,
And
it depends on what the question is.
Well, I think you'll be okay with it, but hopefully. But if you could go back to when you first came into the texting industry, SMS industry, what is the number one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Don't underestimate the difficulty of compliance.
Mm.
And this is just like, and I've had this be an issue in a lot of other startups of mine before. I never imagined in a million years how many companies are out there that have a CDP, a data store of all their customer information, that never thought that they should collect consent to contact. We've spent phenomenal amounts of time and energy needing to educate customers and potential customers, and didn't budget it in a forecast. And would have sort of like the trajectory, like revenue trajectory is obviously like if you're 3 months out, it's a different amount of revenue coming into a startup. I just would have cautioned myself on don't underestimate the sort of expense and time, energy, education necessary to get people thinking about compliance from an SMS and texting front.
Yeah. That makes sense coming from you, from someone in SMS, because a lot has changed in the last few years. There's just so much paperwork with text messaging, but
Yes.
this has been an incredible conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Much. Absolutely.
Very valuable.
Yes. And before we go off air, would you like to tell the audience how they could find you if they want to reach you after the show?
Absolutely. So newtextcode.com or jeremy@newtextcode.com. Would love to hear from anybody. I'll continue to answer questions. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Jeremy Levitan. If you search for me or New Text Co, I'll pop up. Happy to talk to anybody about the state of texting and how you can modernize your ability to reach consumers when they're most receptive. Every single consumer has a cell phone in their pocket. We are under leveraging it.
That's true.
Absolutely.
We absolutely are. And in closing, audience members, we would like to ask you to please go check out BDEX's Omni IQ. I'm going to pop a QR code up on the screen for those of you who are watching, but anyone on podcast, simply go to bdex.com, click the try for free button, or use this QR code on the screen to create an Omni IQ account. And once you create your account, you simply upload your CSV file of your first-party customer data, and you'll get gender, birth year, household income analytics, all complimentary, no credit card required. So just check it out. We don't do anything with your data, but it's a great way for you to learn about your data. And once you see it, you're going to want to learn more. So you can upgrade to find out more and use our machine learning to expand that audience. So we would love to hear from you, audience. Please reach us. Let us know if there's anyone you would like to see on the show, and let us know at info@bdex.com. Share your qualitative data with us so we can make this better for you. Thank you so much. And thanks again, Jeremy.
Thank you.
All right.